We're got a 3, 2, 1.
What?
Lucia.
Yes.
Yada yada does it. Hello and welcome to Key Radio Live, the Thanksgiving special. This is gonna be a bit of a different one, a bit of a off-season type of deal. In fact, we're not even really talking about Key this episode, but we are talking about closely related, first cousin, like multiple times removed. Basically,
It's time to be thankful, and we're all just here to spread love and spread some positiveness. And
to other not Key works.
The ends we love that you will likely enjoy if you are a Key fan.
yeah.
So yeah, this is basically this episode. We're gonna be talking a lot about basically a lot of the normal ones that you think about whenever it's like, okay, I finished Key, what's next? The recommendations that a lot of us will just end up giving you anyway. So now anytime someone asks, we just link this video.
Yeah, because unfortunately, as much as we love Key, it is a finite pool, and once you finish, there's that void of just wanting more, and hopefully a few or all of these works maybe will help fill that in some way or another.
But I will say, for people on the episode, Italian Ice is killer. Like, you're gonna be hearing me munching down on this like all episode. It's
Munch.
I'm so jealous.
Muffle. All right. So, first work we need to talk about, sort of an elephant in the room because it got a recent translation. Snow. I just call it air but winter.
That's basically what it is.
It's a very summarized version of it, but yes, okay. The thing about Snow, if those who don't know, is that it's done by Studio Mebius, which is another subsidiary of Visual Arts,
subsidiary of Visual Arts.
I mean, it's technically still around. It's just
God, we don't talk about modern day Mebius.
We don't talk about Mebius outside of Snow because we shouldn't. It's not family friendly. But yes, Mebius is a part of Visual Arts, and Visual Arts, they're much more than just Key, but Key is obviously their main juggernaut that everyone recognizes.
They're the moneymakers.
They're the moneymakers, but there are a lot of other Visual Arts subsidiaries, including Mebius. And after Canon was released, Mebius was quote-unquote inspired by it, and basically they made their own attempt at the Nakige formula. So this was before Nakige as a thing was really solidified.
Yeah.
And the Key formula wasn't developed. So interestingly enough, while it is a Nakige, it is quite different to what you'd expect from a Key work, while still having the same Key vibe and still having the same cores of appeals of Key.
I would wager to say that the best way to summarize it is that it's a deconstruction of the Nakige formula before the Nakige formula was even really
I hate that word.
a thing. In this case,
kind
it
of the
is.
truth, though.
I won't deny it, I just don't like the word.
I understand. EVA fans can be horrible about the word deconstruction because EVA is not a deconstruction of mecha. This is the hot take for the episode. Evangelion is not a deconstruction of mecha. It's a normal mecha anime. You just need to grow up.
I'll pretend to understand what that means.
Anyways, but I will say it is a deconstructed Nakige. Basically, they took Canon and to some part Air, because it came out after Air, and basically went, hey, let's do our own take on this. And
Air dropped when Snow was early in development.
So I would say that maybe deconstruction is not a best word, but it's a subversion on the Nakige format.
Sure.
Yeah.
It shares many elements that make a Nakige good. In fact, I was crying through a good fair few of the rounds. But I would say if you're going for vibes, it's very different. But I will say, Air is to summer what Snow is to winter, and that is what I love about it, is that it is a very, if you're thinking, oh wow, this is gonna be super cozy, nah. It makes winter out to be pretty harsh half the time.
I mean, argue against that in areas like I think it strikes a balance. Like,
It strikes a balance, but air also strikes a balance.
yes, I will agree with that, but like there are a lot of moments of like just like I'd actually say, dare I say it, it's more of like a general a representation of the season of winter compared to something like Canon, because Canon is a very tame version generally since it takes place in a town. Here in Snow, we have a setting that's in the middle of the mountains in the countryside, which is very similar to Air's own rural seaside town. But
Yep.
this one is
In basically Hokkaido.
it's basically in Hokkaido, but not quite. It's like in a fictional village called Ryujin Village.
We'll get
And-
to Hokkaido, trust me.
We'll get to Hokkaido, but this,
Oh, we will get to Hokkaido.
yes, but this setting is, in my opinion, I find it to be very key-like, especially like with the backgrounds, which I'm just gonna say it, probably my favorite looking backgrounds of any visual novel period. Like I think
Give it to
Snow-
that for visual novels of the era, at least. Like it, but it is gorgeous. Like the
Snow is
setting
fantastic.
itself is a character. Ryujin Village, like Snow could not take place anywhere else.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's sort of like Tori Shirojima, like Summer Pockets. In Air,
Yes,
where the
that's
setting
a
is very
good-
much-
That's a
This-
good comparison.
The setting very much is like essential, and it has a fully realized world. And what I will say is that Snow, when you look at it, it immediately vibes Key, because the heroines and the setting are straight out of a Key work. Like
Mhm.
I would say, if nothing else, the heroines and their like the setting it feels like something straight out of Key.
Sumino
would-
especially, because she's super
Yes.
moe. She's almost a precursor to Komari with some elements of Misuzu.
Yeah,
She's
Sumino-
amazing.
Sumino
Which
is
might-
basically
Which
another-
might not be encouraging to some people, but hey, please give this
But
visual novel.
There
a
are
try.
other heroines too.
There are
Like
other heroines,
that's
but
the best part.
Let's take this one step at a time. Because
I do want to elaborate on my air take though, because I do think I can still stand on like what it means by like harsh winter, and I'm gonna make a comparison here that I pointed out to Lucia before he had even read Snow. So I would
I
like
was
to
the
point
latest
out here.
reader of the three of us. I read it this year. I think the two of you read it 1 or 2 years ago.
I read it 2 years ago, but
Yeah.
I recently reread it this year, and I basically went, "Hey Lucia, listen to this soundtrack as we normally do because we have many a voice chat."
Yes.
And I went, "Listen to the soundtrack," and it's the title screen. And the first thing Lucia pointed out was, "Wow, that wind." The
Yeah, it's true.
But then, as the wind subsides to the rest of the melody, the song got cozier. And it is literally basically how Snow is. It's both harsh, but it can be comforting. It does not pull any punches, though. Like, it can get rough. Especially in the post-true, like, not true routes, but post-legend routes. Like,
Oh yeah, like it's not afraid to go deep into depression, whereas Canon kind of was out unless you're Makoto.
I don't want to talk too much about like the story yet. I still
'Cause we can't do any spoilers this episode,
Yeah,
and
we
that's
can't do
something
any
I should have
spoilers.
mentioned.
And also, I just want to take like breaking down Snow one at a time. But I think one big thing we have to recognize about Snow is the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It is stellar.
Or-
Like it is, like it is very much like the season trilogy in that it's like sort of a nostalgic Asian comforting landscape and town. Like it's something that I associate with the season trilogy, and I feel like if Snow was made by Key and had the same type of mannerisms as a Key work, it would fit right in. Like there
Yeah.
would basically be no difference.
there are a few differences, I would say, but yeah, in general, like if it was adjusted to fit the Key brand a bit better, like it wouldn't need much adjusting.
Yeah. It is the most key-like of the works we will talk about today, I would say.
Definitely, like in terms of like overall, it feels. Very
See, we have 5 on here, so I will argue that 5, up until the true route, is still very Key-like, but but that's also
Yeah.
because it literally shares a writer with one of Key's most major works. But let's talk snow. Gotta keep the focus on snow. Snow's atmosphere I do find interesting, and it's funny that you bring up the season trilogy. One thing I think at the core of the season trilogy that makes it so unique is that in a sense it almost fetishizes, and I hate using this word, but in the case it appeals to the idea of a nostalgic Asian life, like specifically life in Japan. Because if you think about when you think about Clannad Air and Canon, you think of these settings that are distinctly Japanese, like especially Clannad, you get the Japanese working man life. In Air you get a Japanese small town, and in Canon you get a Japanese high school. Like in general, there is something appealing about that to a lot of people, and it's why the season trilogy sticks out. Because as you get further and further into Key, Japanese lifestyle becomes less prominent. It's very weird.
Yeah, I agree. Because, like, the season trilogy, like, I'm someone who grew up in the Asian landscape, and I think the season trilogy basically nails, like, that childhood nostalgia, like, to a T. Like, I'd argue 1 does it too, but especially the season trilogy does it very well. And I also say Snow captures that as well. Like, it feels like home to me, even though I've never been to, like, this Ryujin village. And I actually I lived in Hong Kong, which doesn't get any snow, but it still has that same just familiarity with all the vibes and stuff.
And I would like, and I have a theory as to why like we never get settings like these again, especially even in modern visual novels. We don't get these a lot. It's just a lot of writers that wrote these types of stories, and I'll use Maida as an example, just grew depressed with the Asian life landscape. Like in general, like Maida's recounted on Twitter how much he loathes the Asian working life. So like it makes sense why he doesn't really want to write a work like Clannad. In fact, it makes works like Nekogari and stuff that he's gone back to and written that focus on the Asian lifestyle very much feel like him facing his own like problems, because he's basically sort of venting them out through returning to a setting he vowed never to return to.
But it's interesting that HBR is in a setting that's super different from anything we know in this world. So
HBR is his escapism after Nekogari was his facing reality. And
right.
I feel that's a lot of case with this, and I think it's why it gives these works, especially Snow, a very distinct bittersweet atmosphere, because we never get works like these anymore. Works that prioritize like this very weird atmosphere that's like hard to describe. It's almost like you're walking into your grandmother's house and like it's got a woody smell. It's not like super nice. It's comfy. It's cozy.
Nostalgic, that's what I call it.
It's nostalgic. Like it's like walking into your grandmother's house. There's coffee. There's like hot cocoa cooking. It's really cold. You bundle up. All the furniture's wooden. You've got that classic like weaved type furniture. You're sitting down. You're all bundled up. The cocoa comes out. The house doesn't smell.
You're basically just describing the inn right now.
Yeah, like, but that is the vibe I get whenever I see works like this, and Snow captures this almost best. It's hard to find a work that captures the atmosphere that I just described, which I would describe as a child walking into a fond relative's home. That is what it feels like. That is what it feels like reading Snow for the first time, is that you're walking into a relative that you're close to, but you only ever get to visit on special times, and then you get there and it still feels like home, even if it's not really home. And that's what's so nice about Ryujin Village, is that you get this sense of familiarity, even if you've never been there. Because like I've never visited Japan, but like I still felt I felt a shared experience, particularly because I had a place like that. Living in Arizona, whenever we would go up the mountain to visit a town where we would stay at an inn, it was always very nice. The people up on the mountain were always super sweet. It was a very nice experience any single time. We would always go, and I have those distinct memories of that snow time memory. Arizona is a shockingly snowy place. It's very funny. Like you would think Arizona desert, but you hit the mountains, man. Mount Lemon was like super snowy. We would go up to Mount Lemon and we would, have those memories of me like going on a sled. Like it was great. Like you have a great time with that. So snow captures that. Like it captures a wintertime nostalgia that's not centered around childhood or in this case a holiday. Like it is the nostalgia of the season outside of the holidays, basically, is how I would greatly
Should
describe
mention here, most of snow takes place in February.
yeah,
which
it's
is
like the dead of winter.
unusual. Yeah.
Okay, so as we were saying, one of the biggest things in snow is that atmosphere, but obviously another big thing that makes snow similar to Key is the heroines.
Yes.
They're like, if nothing else, the heroines just straight up feel like they're from a Key work.
Oh my word. Like we've got our token lolly that basically is just legitimately just like Hina personality wise in certain cases. It's very funny. Like I've always made this comparison.
Asahi is very similar to Hina, yeah, and Sumino,
Yeah.
as you said, is incredibly similar to Komari. She's basically Komari as a childhood friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I have to unfortunately say is we can't talk about my favorite heroine too much because a lot of her is tied to the true roots, which we can't go into deeply.
Yeah.
My favorite
I will get to that.
my favorite heroine is an outright spoiler. So like
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
unfortunately my favorite heroine is literally a route that you unlock only after the true roots, and then like the twist
So-
of her
so
entire
is
character is
Manpig's,
her
like-
identity.
and
Like-
that's another thing here that we should talk about. Like, and this is not really a spoiler, but it is worth mentioning. Snow is one of those weird visual novels that has the true route in the middle. And it
Yeah,
sounds strange,
that's
but it's
what I-
necessary for this
That's
work.
what I wanted to say is that the formula is completely different from a typical Nakige. Like, it's not. The climax isn't at the end like it usually is. The climax is in the middle. Like, there's sort of like a giant peak in there with the true route and the route that comes right after that. And the next are sort of like resolution routes that wrap it in a bow, but they're not like the emotional high point. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't even say that I would say that they're still the emotional high point, but it's not they're still the falling action. Basically, the way I would describe it is that the majority of your plot is happening right in the middle, and then you're seeing the aftermath.
How are we going to clean this up? How are
Yeah.
we going to clean this up? What are
Well,
you going to do about it?
Yeah, basically, it is the aftermath of these of the true route that you end up getting it. And that makes its structure very different from Key because at the time the formula wasn't set yet. We didn't need it came right after Air, but before Clanad. We didn't have a true route. Like we didn't have a true route like formula at that point. They just sort of went, "Wow, Air kind of had this. Let's try it," and it worked out well in their case because I do say that the two routes that follow the results of the true routes were very impactful, and it almost makes me wish Key would try this once, where they do a true route in the middle, and then they have aftermath routes that aren't like Little Buster's aftermath route.
Yeah.
Because those weren't really aftermath routes. I mean routes that
They were
literally
tacked on.
I mean routes that literally are intended to explore like what happens after. Like
Let me put it this way. The post-legend routes only work if you understand legend.
yeah. And then there's not Air to an extent. It's almost as if in Air, after the ending, we followed Haruko after Air route. That would be what Snow does in comparison to Legend. Legend is Air route, and then the rest of it is like if there was a Haruko route that could only be unlocked after beating the game. That explores the aftermath of the events of Air. That's kind of what it is, and that's what makes Snow so unique. I love it about that is because of the fact that it almost makes it feel more conclusive because you get not just the ending, you get the aftermath of it. You get a nice like bow on top, and it's these two fantastic
And you
routes.
get Tomokoi too. So
Yes.
Let's not talk about that. We went a bit farther than where I was going, but essentially, yeah, as I wanted to say, there are two characters that we can't really talk about because of Legend, but there are other heroines. There's Meiko, who is like sort of like the sassy character. It's hard to describe Meiko. Like I guess the best example would be like Kurugaya from Little Busters. But
Kinda,
that's, like,
yeah.
the closest I can think of. Like, it's really hard to pin down Mako's personality. But
Give
she is the fan favorite with.
It's
I know-
funny
I know-
because she's my least favorite
Yeah,
character,
I was about to say that because I know you.
Which is
you
to
weren't
say-
as good of a fan.
which is to say B tier, because there are no bad characters in Snow.
Yeah, but like aside from Lucia, which I don't want to intentionally single you out, but it is
It's
what I've
different.
noticed. It's
But
like-
I do want to talk about my favorite character when you get a moment.
It's just Mako is the fan favorite, and a lot of people like her personality. If you read Snow, you're probably gonna gravitate to her because a lot of people do. And who else am I missing? Ah, of course, Oka. Oka is like, it's really hard to talk about Oka in terms of like her actual story relevance. But Oka is a very like comforting character that's a lot similar to, say, Umi from Summer Pockets.
yes.
I would closer relate her to Sheena in Cood Wafter, personally.
I say give her, it's Sheena with Hina's personality.
Yeah,
Like
there
that
you
that
go.
is that is the mix what Oka gives. Like you've got Sheena's demeanor with Hina's personality. You've got Oka.
Yeah, and the thing about Oka is that she was a kind of a surprise to me because I don't typically like the more louder child characters. Like I like the more mature acting ones, but Oka somehow manages to be like a realistic depiction of a character her age while just still being comforting and like familiar. Like when I saw Oka and I got to read her scenes, I just had a big smile on my face. She's a very relaxing character despite
The
like,
snowball
being
CG, the giant
Snowball
snowball
CG is
CG is so cute.
it's
I-
so adorable.
I would say the reason why she's appealing as a character is because of the fact that most child characters get on a lot of people's nerves because they're either so infantile that they're like unbearable to be around, or they're so mature that like it's like this no kid would say that. Oka strikes the middle ground of being both, yeah, clearly a kid, but also like, hey, kids know more than they let on. Like it respects the fact that the kid isn't stupid, but also respects the fact that she's a kid. Like
Yeah, I think just Oka is a very comforting character, and so with the characters over, I think we gotta
Characters aren't over. The characters aren't over.
you're
I
missing
want
a
to talk
couple.
about. I want to talk about Kanata right now.
They're-
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, absolutely.
Because he is one of the best protagonists I have ever seen, and I don't want to downplay the fact that Kanata is probably the biggest difference between Snow and the Season trilogy, because they're really exploring how much farther you can go when you just make your main character a nice person. Like, Kanata is someone who is equally as reliable as someone like Tomoya, without all of the asshole Yuichi stuff. Like, just make him a nice guy and someone anyone would want to be around and anyone would want to trust. So he is kind of my favorite character in Snow.
He's the only because that kind of personality was a lot more popular in like earlier Galgates. It's sort of like a trope. But yeah, Kanata doesn't have a very rough around the edges personality. That's not him. Kanata
Right.
is just a good to honest person, like teenager his age, and he wants to do his best for his family and those he cares about.
He actually sort of branded the rough around the edges like main character like themselves almost, like outside of like he sort of made that like the thing. It's like, I'm depressed. I've forgotten everything. Let's go, homies. I hate everyone.
Right, and Kanata just isn't like that. And I
Yeah.
really
He's not the brooding
that.
protagonist. He's more like, let's take this story by the horns type of protagonist, and I like that. Like
He has agency. Like, he has a lot of influence in the story, and he feels like a very realized character that doesn't feel too exaggerated, but is also has the same purpose as something like as a character like Tomoya, where he has a point in the story where you can just connect to him, and
Of
yet
the
he
three,
drives the story
he's
forward.
closest to Tomoya, I would
He's
say.
closest to Tomoya, yeah. I don't think he's similar to Yukito at all.
No,
No.
God, no.
Despite Snow and Air being similar, he's nothing like Yukito.
He is the
And-
biggest tonal difference between Snow and Air.
Yes.
Yeah, like he's good. He's an honest man, and I really respect. The
And
kind of
it's
character
going to
he is.
become a big talking point on Battle of the Works when we get there. But
Oh, it definitely will be.
Okay, and yeah, and with all of those characters that you've done, I do want to talk about the other biggest difference about Snow and typical keywords is that Snow is a lot more about the plot than it is about the crying. Like in terms of like the message and the movingness. It's not a story that's going to change your life. So Key is definitely a franchise where it has very much made its identity on imparting messages to the viewers and giving like those lessons that can help you with your daily life, the way you act, the way you see people, the way you treat people. And I think one of the biggest things that's important with Key is to not forget those lessons because they really do improve how you are as a person. Like I have been changed a lot from Key, and I think the part of the reason I feel like I'm a very I don't want to like sound like too pretentious, but an easy person to get along with, and someone who likes to talk with other people, is because I've read Key and I genuinely try to keep every single message in my heart and use them to better myself as a person on a constant basis. Like Manpig pre-Key is a very different person. Snow isn't gonna do that. Like, it's a great story and it will have you, like, it will be an emotional roller coaster. It will make you feel things, but it's not gonna change your life.
But it damn well might blow your mind.
It
Did
will
for me.
blow your mind because Snow's writing is surprisingly rich, and it has built this world. As we've said, Ryujin Village is its own beast and its own location, and it has a lot of history and lore and mythology similar to something like Air, which is why we have that comparison. There's a lot of lore, there's a lot of building, this is a rich world with the characters just part of the influence. And you get to see how each and every single tie that's dropped in at the beginning will slowly but surely build up into this grander narrative that it doesn't seem to be at the beginning. There will be a lot of unanswered questions at the first two routes, especially a certain, like, okay, so Sumino's route, which is quote-unquote the main heroine, Snow's Sumino route is a lot like Misuzu's route in Air in that, yes, when you complete it, you're not going to understand it very well. And it's going to leave you wanting more. And Sumino's route is what unlocks the true route, and that is where everything of Snow, it is the soul of Snow. That is where everything kicks into high gear, and it is one hell of an experience.
Oh boy. I remember you like staying up till midnight to watch my reactions to finishing Legend Route. Like,
Legend Route is a trip. It
was so fun.
I love that route so much. It
has one of my top 5 visual novel EDs too. Like, which is something Uttori and I do not agree on with Yuki no Kanata, but
I don't like Snow's vocal songs in general, so like that's the one downside.
I love them. I love them so much.
We can agree to disagree.
I put them in the same tier as the one like OVA openings, just because I don't like the fact that like the singer sounds like she's just dying inside.
Fair, I guess.
One weird thing to note is that there's a certain insert song sung by a certain character, but it's actually not sung by the heroine's voice actress, but her console voice actress.
That's very funny, yes.
I did not know that.
Speaking of the console voice,
it's supposed to be her console voice actress, and I don't know if Uttori is about to say this, but I'm gonna say it because this is my territory. She's Ayako Kawasumi, aka Saber from Fate.
It's very funny. It's very funny.
Very funny, and it's
I don't know
meant to
what
be
that
her, but if you read the PC version, you're not gonna get it because, like, again, for some reason they made her console voice actress the one that sings the song, which isn't what we see as her actual voice actress. So it's like,
Well, I mean, you see it in the console, which
in
is
the console version,
I- I-
but most people don't read that version.
I reread this on Dreamcast, and
Oh, you
God,
read it? You opened it?
I did open it. It's fantastic. The console voice actors, like, they just picked more prolific voice actors in general for the console version. It's very funny.
Yeah. All right. So if that's the case, we could leave Snow here because we've been on it for a while. But I do have one quick announcement about it: is that Mario, aka Snowbuster, and I have opened a server for Snow. That is kind of a just a central location for resources and stuff, since, as we talked about, Snow is not a keywork, so we will not be covering it too deeply in Keyverse. So if you are interested in that, I will post a link up in announcements later, and the Snow server is affiliated with Keyverse. So
Yep. So that's one of the big announcements, is that we are getting a Snow server, which is headed by our very own Lucia. And
hi.
yeah. I actually also forgot to mention this, but there's another thing related to the voice actresses that I do want to mention, is Meiko's voice actress.
Oh yeah, I can't believe we didn't talk about this.
I was about to, but I had to.
Yeah, sorry.
But Meiko's voice actress is actually Keiko Suzuki. Now, if you don't know Keiko Suzuki, she's voiced a lot of key characters, including our very own Haruka Saigusa.
Or the
or
better
Hoshi-
twin, or the better twin.
Or Hoshino Yumemi, or
And Shizuru.
Chizuru, yeah,
She's voiced a lot of key characters.
continues to voice a lot of key characters.
Aren't half of the Snow heroines?
Actually, yeah, now that you mention it, there's the one.
A lot of
spoiler
them,
character-
yeah.
There's a one spoiler character we can't talk about who's actually voices Rin, but I want to bring Keiko Suzuki up because.
Well, also Asahi is voiced by Rita, which I didn't know until way later, but she's the vocalist for most of the Little Busters songs.
Now that you mention it, yeah, that is correct, huh?
Yeah.
The more you know. Yeah, it's nuts, but essentially that's what I'm saying, is that Keiko Suzuki, this is one of her earliest roles with visual arts, not necessarily key.
I think it is her earliest role.
I can't be 100% certain on that, but it's one of her earliest.
I'm gonna check while you're talking.
But the thing about Keiko Suzuki is, remember how I said Meiko was a fan favorite? A big reason for that is her personality and just her way that she interacts with the people around her, and it's gold. Like, it is, she is the one of the most entertaining characters to read and listen to, and Keiko Suzuki's performance as Meiko is, in my honest opinion, her best performance to date. Because there are so many lines that I remember from Snow that come from Meiko. I remember the exact tone that Meiko spoke them in, and it's perfect. It's so perfect. And I'd straight up say, if you like Keiko Suzuki like I do, because I'm one of her biggest fans as a voice actresses, if you like her, please read Snow for Meiko, because she's entertaining as hell.
Yeah, Snow is her first role with VA.
Well, there we go. I'm almost confident, like, a big reason Keiko Suzuki would go on to voice so many characters in Key, like, especially Key, is because her performance as Meiko was just so dang good. Like, I'm basically confident, because it is a role-defining personality, and I feel like the only reason people don't recognize her as Meiko more is because Snow is very obscure.
Right, we didn't get a translation of it until this year, so...
Yep.
And it came out like 2 weeks after the Reflection Blue translation, so a lot of Key fans happen to have missed it. It's just how things worked out. Yeah, don't miss out on Snow, it's fantastic.
I'm planning on rereading it soon, especially since it's the winter. But yeah.
Yeah.
Point is, Snow is great. If you like Key's atmosphere and its heroines and characters, and you want something that's more like rich in plot, like if you like Air for the lore and the mystery and the world building, read Snow. It's basically made for you. Like, it is very much in the same vein. Okay. So
Shall we move on? Well, I mean,
We can.
Well,
let's move on to the other one that has links to Key, because Snow had links to Key. Also, wait, actually, one thing I also should mention. Parts of Snow is written by Suzumoto Yuichi, who made Planetarian, parts of Clannad. He's part of Key as well. So another reason.
Right.
And arguably most notably, especially if you're a Clannad fan, is Kotomi's route. Which should tell you about as much as you need to know about Snow.
Yeah, it's very much in the same vein. So Snow has its links to Key, and
as Hero 2.0 insta-read.
Symphonic Rain is actually does not have any links to Key. We're gonna probably talk about Ram and 5.
Yeah, we'll talk about 5 next.
Cool, because this is my wheelhouse. 5 is
This is the one where I can't talk about because I've yet to read 5. It's the only one of these four that I haven't.
I have to sell Manpig on 5. This is the
sell me
goal.
Right,
Sell
we
me on
gotta
5
do this
right
now.
So,
Uttori, I should mention, Uttori prefers 5 to Snow, and I am the opposite, but I do love both of them. I still want people to read 5. Like, it is amazing.
so 5. Yes, this little gem, this little piece of Kai goodness. This is what
Do you want to talk about the story first or the development story? Because I think the development story for this thing is fascinating.
The development story is fascinating. We're gonna mix it in. So imagine it came out in 2008, right?
Yep.
It's 2008, same year as Little Busters EX, correct? I'm trying to remember my dates.
The same day.
Yeah, so it's the same
They
day as Little
dropped
Busters.
on the same day. Visual arts, you are stupid. Okay.
All right, so we're setting the scene. You're Kai in 2008. You're in a subsidiary to Visual Arts. Basically, Key's sister, Ram. You've never heard of them. This is the middle child that you've never heard about. And they release this little work called 5 on the same day as Little Busters EX. And this work would go on to be known by anyone who read it as one of Kai's, if not Kai's, best work.
Exactly.
That is the development story of Kai. Jun Maeda literally wrote a song for 5 that is
Jun Maeda was the lead composer for 5. He wrote like
vocal
2/3 of the
songs.
track and all of the vocal songs.
Man wrote a vocal song for 5 that has gone on to be remixed not once, but twice in Key.
Yes.
Well, one thing I will say is I actually have, I've listened to the songs, the OST of 5, and it's stellar. It's the only thing of 5 that I have consumed properly, and it's stellar. Like, it
5's
feels like a
soundtrack.
Jun Maeda OST.
5's soundtrack is an absolute masterpiece on how to do a visual novel soundtrack right. And this is coming from someone who actually holds the opinion that Maeda can be about 70-25 when it comes to his soundtracks. So, I will say with utmost confidence that I'll be able to sell Manpig on 5. And here's the reason why. This is basically just Summer Pockets for winter, except instead of the true route ending with Pocket, which gives you hope, it just ends with Alka. And that sounds rough, but he manages to make it satisfying. That is kind of like how 5 is. 5's true route borders on so sad that I would argue it shares more in common with an Utsuge than it does a Nakige. But I still say it's a Nakige because there's a shimmer of hope. There's a glimpse, a tiny glimpse. It's just rough.
If it was not for Honoka, that would be different. But like, and that is not a spoiler. Like, you will know from the moment you meet her that she is going to make you feel better.
Yeah, I've heard about that from basically everyone that's read 5, is that the main difference 5 has from Key, like how Snow is more with the plot, 5 is more just gonna tear your heart apart and smash into pieces.
Oh yeah.
5
It's
is
so good.
Okay, which I was about to say, to be fair, I actually quite like. I don't prefer it, because I have had enough time. Like, people who have seen me recently, who have seen my reactions to a certain film I watched recently, know that I'm very tired of just like
Pain.
sobbing my eyes out because of pain. Because I feel like at this point, almost everything I get into destroys me in some way or another. I have been put through the ringer so much in these past 2 years, but I can't stop.
5.
It was also a franchise that I wasn't even like trying to like cry to. It was there and it just found me. I can't escape. I just accept my fate of just pain. I live in pain.
Kai in 5 does not care whether or not you care about these characters. He doesn't care if you love them so deeply that you would do anything to save them. You can try your darndest. You can try to pull a Tomoya and Clannad and do your diddly darn best to try
and
and
the game
turn
lets
this
you
around.
try. That's
It really does.
It really try.
It lets you try. It lets you do everything in your power, but then every single time you fail. And it's so good because it fits with the theme of 5 so well, which I can't get into. It is a spoiler, but 5 is just it is Kai's early masterpiece. It is what solidified him for me as like just easily one of my favorite writers that has ever hopped onto Key. This is not his earliest work. His earliest work was on the second half of Minagi's route in Air.
No, not exactly true either. That's his earliest work with Key, yeah.
That's what I meant. This is not his earliest work with Key. It might be one of his earliest works with visual arts, though. Like,
well, no, because RAM existed before 5. Like, that's where the other half of his development history comes in.
What I meant is Air. Like, Minagi was one of his first works with visual arts because he had like some stragglers pre-visual arts, but he hopped on shortly after canon. He did basically some assistant writing in canon, but like he was never credited. Basically, like that's kind of how that works when you're an assistant writer.
He was still working with RAM at the time because RAM existed concurrently to Key in the early days, but then was dissolved into Key when their first 2 games didn't sell and they needed more bodies working on Clannad. And then after Clannad released, Baba let RAM come back together. They made 5 and it sold poorly because Visual Arts decided to release it on the same day as Little Buster's Ecstasy.
Yeah, so everyone was reading Little Busters. It's so tragic.
It really does feel like that. What was that one? It really does feel like it's like whenever Nintendo like picks a franchise and it's like it's releasing on the same day as like another major franchise and it's just
Chibi Robo. It's the Chibi Robo of visual arts.
It's the Chibi Robo of visual arts, which is so unfortunate because RAM, when you have Kai, for people who don't know, Kai is a powerhouse when it comes to writing. Like, you have read parts of his work with Key and have probably loved it, but didn't even realize it was him. He wrote, his weakest work was Clannad. Like, that was where he showed up the weakest, I will admit. I feel he was salty.
Route is really good.
Kyo's route is really good, but then you also have Kapei route.
Yeah, fair.
So
which is not good.
Twin's route was fantastic. That is one of Kai's best works, but I do feel he was mildly salty over the RAM dissolving.
Yes.
But in general, Kai is a super strong writer. Like he's incredibly consistent. He's been with Key for a while. He was promoted to like the lead writer of Key after Maida decided to have a chance to step down, which is why Key has a different direction now. He's been on the director's board for not just Loopers, but he's also been on the director's board overseeing pretty much every project that has come out of Key since post Harmonia, basically. So
didn't he direct Harmonia also?
He did direct Harmonia, but he wasn't official.
He was a huge. Basically, when Harmonia went official, Kai was the person who basically took it under his wing and polished it up for public release.
Right.
Yeah, one thing I will say about Kai, though, is that he's a very, he takes his time writing. Like,
yes.
If you notice, a lot of his roots tend to be longer.
Yep.
Especially in the early Key. He wrote Minagi's route, which is big, and the Yukine route, which is not big, but for the events that conspire, it does take a bit to like get through to it. Like he's very much a character-based writer, and he takes his time. Would
very
you say 5 is the same?
yes.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Five is a very long visual novel, and each route he takes his time with. Kai, that's actually just Kai's signature, because like anytime I think about Kai, I always think of the slow burn. Summer Pockets in of itself was a slow burn. Like the entirety of that visual novel was a slow burn. So like
It has 5 routes, but it is the same length as Snow with 7 routes. I think their line count is within a couple thousand, right?
yeah, like lengthwise, 5 was slightly longer by like an hour, but 5
Yeah.
also gave me a smaller cast, so you're gonna grow more attached to this cast. If I was to say which work it bared most similarity to, I would say it's if Summer Pockets met kind of Little Busters, but also had like the snowy setting of canon. Like it's basically how I would
The
describe it.
snowy setting of Snow, because Hokkaido is harsh. Like one of the first
Hokkaido
things
is
that
awesome.
happens, one of the first thing that happens, like on the second or third day, is like Kaede tells Takahiro, "Hey, I need you to go into town and get some groceries." And going into town involves a 30-minute ride on a snowmobile into town and an hour ride back.
Yep.
So
So it's one of those
it's
things
rough.
where like the only reason I said canon is because I was trying to compare keyword to keyword. But
Fair,
yes,
fair.
basically, if you want a winter work, this is it. But it shares a lot of similarities. I'd say cast-wise with Little Busters, but tonally with what would then become Summer Pockets, because the setting is very important in this work.
Summer
Ho-
Pockets would not be what it is without 5. Let's put it that way.
Summer Pockets.
I've heard that.
Summer Pockets, if you Manpig, you're gonna read 5 and you're gonna read the final route and you're gonna go, wow. Wow, yeah, no, I see where everyone is coming from when they bring the Summer Pockets. comparison.
Yeah.
But I'll bring one that's not spoilery, and this is gonna be basically this. The Torishiyojima Island is truly a more realized version of the setting of 5. Like in terms of what Kai was going for, I think that he is very good whenever he puts his all into making the setting a character in of itself. Because
Because I really like it when there's like lore and like background in a story. That's why I like Air and Snow a lot, because
Yes.
I love mythology, especially like that kind
Yeah.
of just interest in the natural, and that's like my favorite kind of setting.
Yeah, and I would say because it's Hokkaido, it's an actual like named setting. There's a bit less of that mysticism because Torishiyojima is obviously made up, stuff like that. But the advantage to it being Hokkaido is there's already a history behind it. Like there is a certain history behind it, and there's a nice interesting.
Fair, Torishirojima is based off a real place as well. Just
Yeah,
like,
but they
has
just
a
made up
real-
all the lore.
Yeah,
Well,
they
the
made out of lore, but it has a real place.
history in both 5 and Summer Pockets is a lot more based on the history of the characters and how they relate to the setting,
Yep.
rather than the history of that setting, like Air or especially Snow.
Now, in terms of key magic usage, it is closest to Summer Pockets. Easily, mainly because
That makes sense because they're both written by the same person.
Yeah.
this is why I have solidified that my favorite writer for key magic is Kai, because when Kai writes key magic, he uses it as a service to the crying, not as the solution to the crying. And this is something that we can talk about a lot on whenever we do an episode or an entire season that deep dives into key magic. But I will just put this out here. As a personal take, I always prefer it when key magic is used as the catalyst for the crying rather than it being used as a thing to cheer you up afterwards. It's just my preference. I have never liked key magic as like the wipe your tears type of magic. Like, hey, I know it's sad, but hey, we got a little bit of magic here. Let's sprinkle it on the pixie
I
dust.
like both. I think both have their place, and
I do think both have their place, but I do have a preference, and it's Kai. It's
that's
how
fair.
Kai writes.
that is
And
fair.
Let me just put it this way: if you liked how Summer Pockets handled key magic, you're gonna enjoy how 5 handles magic because it's basically the exact same. Like
With one key difference that we can't talk about, though.
legitimately cannot talk about, but on the surface, 5 and Summer Pockets, like 5 is Winter Pockets. Like let's be real here.
The fairies have a lot of similarities to the iridescent shades. So.
They do a lot. And also...
One thing I will say is, like, I am very interested in 5. The one thing that prevents me from reading it right away is
machine translation.
Yeah, you have to use machine translation because it's to my knowledge, it's the only one of these 4 that we're talking about that isn't officially.
Yes, that is. Well, that isn't translated at all.
That isn't translated at all. Yeah, and I can machine translate, but I don't like it. Like, it is very clunky and slow. If I can avoid it, I would much rather avoid it, because getting through a visual novel through machine translation is a lot more it is a lot slower and a lot less enjoyable.
So if you're listening to this and want to translate 5, talk to me. I'll hook you up with the game.
Also, talk to me as well. I'll help edit, because I know this work inside and out. I will say that a lot.
If it gets translated, we will definitely do a 5-book club. It needs to happen.
Exactly, Nason. Like, it's not. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily properly invested. It takes more time and it's a lot more clunkier. Like, I have read a few machine translation visual novels in the past, and I can say, despite what some people think, you can enjoy machine translation. There are favorites I have read through machine translation. I read Snow through machine translation. It is just a clunkier process, and if I can avoid it, I'd much rather avoid it. But obviously, if I'm desperate, I can bite the bullet.
I will say, in fairness to 5, it is well worth the time, even when machine translated, to try and go through it.
Can confirm. That's how I read it.
And just to show how close Ram and Key are, Maida Jun, BGM, OPED composition, and lyrics. Special thanks to Hinoe Itaru.
I don't know what she did for 5.
Special thanks to Horito Shinji. I mean, she probably just helped with character designs. Let's be real.
I assume character designs and just art direction.
Yeah, because there are certain things in this VN that just feel like Hinoe Itaru, like, definitely framed.
Now that you say that, I would not be surprised if she designed the fairies. And the reason I say that is because they look a lot like her chibis that she signs her works with.
I also would not be surprised if she did CG framing, because that's typically not the main artist that does that. But Hinoe has always done CG framing for any work she's been in, and
I said she probably did the art direction guidance.
Yeah, like this CG that I'm about to show in chat, like it just vibes something that Hinoe Itaru did.
Oh my god, I love Irie so much.
She's great. So, time to talk about the characters. The characters in 5 are awesome. Like, it's a smaller cast than Snow, but I think it pays.
That's my type.
It pays off in just pure. The characters are good. Like, they are solid characters.
Now, I have one slight issue with this, is that I can't stand the protagonist.
This is the biggest weakness of 5, is that its protagonist is kind of there. He's there, like...
I find that he actively annoys me in 2 of the 4 routes, and in the other 2 routes, he doesn't enhance the experience, but he doesn't detriment it either. Luckily, in the true route, I can't say it, but the true route, you don't have to worry about it. Let's just say that.
I would say he's, like I said, it's like Summer Pockets. He's not even the true protagonist, so.
Yeah, I can say that. That's not spoilery.
A big advantage to 5 that you'll probably find yourself liking, especially if you like Little Busters, is that the bad endings have story. Do the bad endings, please. Do the bad endings. You will not.
Well, one of them is required, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's multiple bad endings with story, so...
Okay, I feel like I probably missed some, but...
Yep. It has a multi-route mystery. Big selling point there. Big key selling point there. And its OST is fantastic. If it were part of Key Sounds label, it would be up there alongside some of my favorite soundtracks in Key.
Wouldn't you say that all of the, entries, especially Snow and 5 have, multi-route mysteries in this thing, outside of, I guess Symphonic Rain to an extent, but even then that has a bit.
Symphonic Rain has it a little bit.
Symphonic Rain has a 2-route mystery. That is what I call Symphonic
Rain. Three.
Yeah, a 3-route mystery, but a 2-route main mystery, because the 3rd route is sort of just the falling action of the first two.
Yeah, fair.
So, but like this is one where like the multi-route mystery carries through to the true route, like much like Summer Pockets. I do quite enjoy the way 5 is paced. 5 is paced very well, and
the heroines are all good. Like, okay, I was complaining about the protagonist, but the heroines carry the routes, so they're all enjoyable.
Yeah, the heroines carry the routes, and 5 does go a bit into like post hookup like life, basically. Like this is one thing I would like to say is that 5 does explore life after just starting the relationship. So it's a very good romance in that regard. Kai took notes from Clan. So there's a lot of similarities to this. If you really like Key, especially during the Clanad Little Busters era, there's no better pick than 5, especially if you're looking for something to scratch that itch. Like it's super solid. Like Lucia read it to scratch a certain itch, and it scratched it very well. Like,
oh, absolutely.
It's funny because like Lucia was like, "Should I read 5?" And I was like, "Yes."
Well, I started it before you did, and then I took a break from it, and then you were like, "You need to finish it," and I did, and I was very happy.
Yeah, because I was like, "This is gonna scratch your itch."
Yeah. Well, because I hadn't gotten to the true route yet, and
the
like it's the kind of thing where the VN changes, but also makes perfect sense in the true route. Like you can't read 5 without it. It's a pretty good visual novel without it. Like,
but a fantastic one with it.
Yes.
One thing I will say is that I am very interested in 5. I have always been interested in 5. It feels like a sort like, especially since like the Clanad Little Busters era is my favorite era of Key. That does sell me a lot, so I'm very interested in checking this out. I will probably get to this, even if it doesn't get a translation, I will probably get to this after I finish a certain like series binge that I'm currently undergoing. But yeah, it is very high on the list, and the more I hear about it, the more higher I put it, because it sounds like my kind of thing. Like, I love like this countryside atmosphere. This is my setting. This is my kind of setting. And
it's Manpig core.
It's very like
Manpig core.
I love like mythology. I love the countryside. I was a countryside boy, so like yeah, it is gravitating.
And the heroine you think you're gonna love, Nene, you're gonna love Nene. I could definitely tell you that. Nene is best girl for me.
But I think you're gonna like pretty much every heroine here. Like they're all charming.
There are no bad heroines in 5 either. Like,
I mean, like I can certainly agree with that, but yeah, I look at Nene, who is I assume the black-haired beauty.
Yes.
Oh my god, my type.
Nene is perfect. Like,
I think Lucia would not be surprised. The CG I just sent is of my favorite character, the most recent one. Yes.
Yeah. Now I'm actually surprised that you like Irie so much, to be honest.
She is my favorite.
Considering your takes on sisters are very different from mine, but
she's a good one.
Interesting. Okay, so have we spoke all we've wanted to say about 5?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, shall we move on to the third one, which is
Symphonic Rain, one of my favorites of all time. It is of the 4 VNs we are talking about today, or at least of the 3 I've read, this one is my favorite.
Yeah, this is the one. This is another one that all 3 of us has read, so we can all discuss this.
Yes.
I have opinions on this, but I will say it is a good visual novel overall. Like,
Symphonic Rain is an okay visual novel with an absolutely 10 out of 10 second half. That is basically. That is how I frame Symphonic Rain, because I'm much like Manpig. I was not into this VN until we hit Alfine. And this is how I'm, before Lucia is able to go off on Symphonic Rain and just go like...
I'll let you 2 go first.
I'll put it this way: my experience with the first two routes, I took Foul Route first, and I thought, wow, that was a route. That was one of the routes of all time. And Lycée Route was a route that existed. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't. It was there. Like, I wasn't like super negative against it, but I also wasn't super positive. I hit. I hit Torta's route, and I was like, wow, there's some promise here. And then I hit Alfine, and much like Little Buster's Refrain, my entire opinion on the visual novel 180 in about 30 seconds. Like there was just Alfine is one of
first
the
5
biggest
minutes.
one of the single biggest 180 routes you can ever have in a visual novel. Like it in the first 5 minutes, it basically flips your entire perspective of this visual novel on the head and goes, yeah, everything was a lie. So good luck now, and here's the truth. And it is one of the coolest twists I have ever seen. Now, does that excuse the slog? Not necessarily. If you can't get through the slog, you can't get through the if you can't get through the slog. But it is one of those where if you just keep reading, it gets good. And it's not too big of a commitment because SR is only about 25 hours.
It is longer than canon and shorter than air, and those two are already pretty close in length. So think like around those two in terms of length.
Exactly.
Right. I would say Symphonic Rain is similar to air in terms of structures, if not identical. Like,
oh, it's completely identical to air in terms of structure.
Okay, I will say I'm one of the few people who don't hate the first initial roots of air. Like, I do enjoy all of them generally. Kano's was a bit of a wet hitter, but it's not terrible. I just thought it was there. Like a certain other route I will talk about later. Minagi's route I actually really liked. Unlike a lot of people, I recognize it has issues, but I still really liked it by the end, and I actually even cried. Misuzu's route is a perfect prelude. And while it is a prelude, that's all I can really say about it. Symphonic Rain is much in the same vein, but like replace the love with absolute fucking hate. Okay, I'm not gonna be.
Not such a huge fan of the first half. Yeah.
I'm not gonna be too mean because I know Lucia loves this, and we're trying to sell this visual novel, and I do think that this visual novel is worth reading if you're interested. But brace yourself. In my opinion, you do need to be prepared. I don't want. Like, there is a lot to get through. And there is one route that I feel can rub a certain person the very wrong way, and it did for me.
It rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
It really rubbed me the wrong way, and it feels like this is everything I don't look for in a story. This is everything I want to avoid when consuming a story. It's a very slow route, and the ending kind of just made me angry. It made me very frustrated. I feel like I wasted time. And
that was the entire point of the route.
It was the point, but if you're going into this for pure enjoyment, you're gonna have trouble with that route. And the other one, it's not bad, but like Kano's route, it's pretty much just okay. Like, it's there, like what Uttori said. It's an addition.
I would say that basically what I would say is, one, there's no comedy in this VN. Like, this VN is drier than like,
which is so funny because it's raining 24/7.
The VN is drier than Florida during a drought. Like, you're just kicking around dust. It's drier than the state of Arizona. Like, my goodness, it is abysmal. Like, when it comes to that, like, it's gonna be slow, but it does pay off. It has one of the biggest slog to payoff ratios I think I've ever seen.
And
like, it's like
that was what I was getting to, is that the torch route is a giant prelude, sort of like Misuzu's, right? It builds into the true roots. And the true roots, despite everything I said, despite all the negativity I just gave about the beginning half, they were stellar. They were absolutely stellar. Like, there's everything you would want from a certain type of story, regardless of what you would like to look for, whether it's good writing or just an emotional message, Symphonic Rain has. And if you can get through the first half, like the character roots, you're in for a treat.
let me give my defense for the character roots, because there's been a lot of just like, mixed opinions, but I actually prefer both Fal and Lisei's routes to both Kano and Minaki. I cannot necessarily say I prefer Torta to Misuzu, but I do think the side heroine routes in Symphonic Rain are better for this reason. They make it very obvious why they're there, whereas Air's two side routes do not do that until the very end. But if you're paying attention, you will know exactly why Fal route is there and why Lisei route is there. As soon as you're like halfway through Torta route, you will understand exactly what those stories were trying to tell you about Chris, because this is a very protagonist-centered story, and about the setting. So, and I do think they are, I prefer them as side routes. Does that make them more entertaining to read? Not necessarily. I was also very angry at the same route that you were, Manpig, but I loved that I was angry at it, because I understood why it needed to be angry, and then it challenged that in the second half.
And I do agree with that.
I agree with that take. I would say that, like, this is why it's hard to say, like, that they're bad. Like, I don't think these routes are bad at their core. I just think that they are not necessarily enjoyable. Like, basically, what I'm saying is, don't go in expecting to have a fun time. Expect to have a time, not a fun time. That's basically where I'm at with Symphonic Rain, because it's well written, and like it, but like it's not a fun time during those two routes. Like and that's what it is.
You have an MC who is dealing with depression, and that is going to like permeate throughout the entire thing. Like, it's not like a depression like Tomoya, where he could still find his own fun and happy things to deal with, which is something a lot of people really respect about Tomoya. Chris is not like that. Chris is depressed, and he doesn't see a lot of hope in the world until other characters show it to him.
I wager to argue that this is what makes Symphonic Rain very hard to sell on the surface, because I've always had a hard time recommending it. Heck, I had a hard time recommending it to you. It's always because
I slept on it for years because of that. Like,
and I have a hard time, particularly because of the fact that it's one of those where you could go, yeah, it's great, but I can't tell you why. Like, I can't tell you why, because for me to tell you why would spoil the fun. And I think that's what's the hard. This is what I leave y'all with Symphonic Rain, because the OST does not stick out for the most part. Like, it's very there, but it's not like, it is the weakest OST of all of these, in my opinion. Like,
I would say it's the second strongest behind Snow. I prefer it to 5's OST.
I disagree, but like, it's fine. I don't prefer Snow. I don't prefer this OST in the most part, but I would say like what carries it is its vocal tracks for the most part. Like, I really like the vocal
tracks are all amazing except the OP. The OP kind of sucks. I'm sorry. Like,
it kind of does, but the OP is really cool when it plays the second time. Its placement is really cool. So I do like where the OP is placed.
Right. Like, think about it like with a cool OP placement like Clannad's, except the song isn't good, whereas Clannad's is. So.
Oh, I think the song's good. Just the vocalist isn't as good. But I will say that, like, what I can leave here is that Symphonic Rain is a hard visual novel to sell, just because of the fact that most of what makes it good is a spoiler. Like, massive spoilers. Absolutely a massive spoiler. It's why I basically just had to tell Lucia, like, Lucia, you're just gonna have to take my word on this. You're really gonna have to take my word on this. But once you reach that payoff, the payoff is so insurmountable that you'll be like, yeah, awesome. Because, like, it is a fine visual novel wrapped with an absolutely stellar ending. And that and ending is paramount. Ending is paramount in any work. And I feel that this is the case with where everything is put into the finale. Like, and
Absolutely,
it paid off.
yeah.
It paid off. It leaves you with a more
It paid
positive.
off so well.
It leaves you with a much more positive take on SR. It'll basically make you forget that the slog that you took to get there even existed for the most part. And then you think back on it, you're like, wow, I really did rag on this for a good half of it. Then you're like, oh wow, because this is one of those works where the moment you hit the true route, it's a completely different work. Especially when you reread it, things will just make sense now. So it is worth it. It is a work worth reading, but it's going to be a hard investment because you're investing time that you're not going to be spending 100% enjoying. This work really throws you into the deep end of a character with depression and does not throw punches with making it as dry as possible because the
In
reason
industry filled with terrible people. Classical music as an industry is, I was in it for a while. It is not a good place.
So you have this character that at its core is deep in depression, and the novel does not mince words with that. Chris is a very hard protagonist to read because of the fact that he views life about as bland as he describes it. Because that's just how he sees it. So it's going to be a very hard read. You're not going to have a lot of fun.
I think they did it well, though. Chris reminds me of a past version of myself.
They represent depression well, and I think that's what is most important at its core. It's why I always say with Nekogari, I have a similar pitch. It's a very hard read, but you'll gain something invaluable through reading it, especially if you learn to sympathize.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's something you will need to learn to get enjoyment out of Symphonic Rain.
One thing I will say is, despite my mixed feelings about Symphonic Rain, is that the ending is worth it, and there is a character that feels straight out of a key work. I won't go too much into them because they are, as Uttori said, spoiler works. But there is one character that is worth reading the game for, and they are genuinely stellar. And if there's one thing that I've taken about this, because I'm pretty sure I've made my opinions pretty clear, is that I have mixed feelings. But if there's one thing without a singular doubt I will say is that it's worth reading the story for that character, and that character is fantastic. They are one of my favorite types of characters ever, and you absolutely should just try to consume that. You have to just. It's a worthwhile fight.
Absolutely.
And to be fair, when it comes to depression, it is a fight, and you do have to fight that with Chris. And if you do not sympathize with Chris, or you have never dealt with someone with depression, you're going to find a lot of the decisions you have to make to even get the quote-unquote good ending very odd. And only for me was I able to understand this, because I have been at points that Chris has been at, just think thought-wise, where it's
this is something I forget who was saying this to me when they were reading it. It might have been Spiral, it might have been Whale, actually, but they got to a point in, I think, Lycée route where there was a choice, and they were like, I don't want to make either of these choices. These both sound like a bad decision. And I'm like, welcome to Symphonic Rain. That's just...
Yeah, it's all bad decisions, and you sort of
Spiral's here. Spiral, was that you who I was saying that with?
You sort of have to have been in a bad headspace before to, even if it's only briefly,
Might have been, okay.
Even if for a week, or or any extended period of time that's more than oh, I just had a bad day at work.
Yeah.
Where you're really going through it emotionally, and if you can to really understand how Chris is.
Yeah. So I'll give this. Chris is probably my favorite male protagonist in a VN. He doesn't quite compare to Ikumi, but he is really up there for me. I absolutely love him, and if you give him the time of day, you will love him by the end.
Yeah. Wisp says, the comedy of the VN helps me get attached to because it brings out that side of him. It's always as important as the sad scenes to me. I'm curious how SR does it without an ounce of it. What SR doesn't have in comedy, it does not lack in slice of life, because there is slice of life. It is just devoid of comedy because Chris is physically incapable of feeling.
It's unentertaining slice of life. It is literally just a slice of daily life. It is.
I would agree with that for Lisa and Foul because they are new to Chris and don't know him very well. With Torta, I would not agree with that because their
Torta is the most fun route.
But their childhood friends, Torta knows him. She knows what he deals with. She knows how to deal with someone with depression, which is why Torta is such an amazing character.
I would also say that and this is part of the reason why the payoff is good. Alfine gives you another side of the characters to get attached to. The True Route gives you a completely separate side of these characters that Chris would never be able to even comprehend.
Yeah, and I will say that they're really, really good.
And while Alfine doesn't flip the paradigm on every character, the one character that doesn't get the paradigm flip is the one character you'll probably end up getting attached to throughout the visual novel, just because she's this little bit of light in Chris's life for the most part. So, yeah, that's basically Symphonic Rain.
Read Symphonic Rain. It's amazing.
I will be right back. You guys can move on to the F talk.
Actually, I want to
should we?
Mentions first.
Yeah, we should do the honorable mentions first. So Manpig and I will each do a couple, and then we'll get to you. Do you want to go first? Because we want to end the episode with F.
Yeah. Okay, so a few of the honorable mentions I want to talk about. First of all, you've probably heard this one because I feel like it's very hard to avoid this one, but Narcissu. If you've heard of
Still have to finish it.
Yeah. Now, Narcissu is essentially a Nakige / Utsuge. I'd actually now that I think about it, it's more Utsuge, but it is a visual novel that was made by Stage Nana, who, if you didn't know, are Key fans. They like Key, and they, in the past, before making Narcissu, they have made Key like Dojin visual novels. Like, they've made one for One, they've made one for Air. I think they made one for Canon. I'm not sure. Yeah, they did make one for Canon. So this is a company that is very much fans of Key, and their earlier works are all fan works of Key works, such as Canon, Air, and One. And Narcissu feels like they are taking that and doing their own thing with it. And Narcissu is basically the story of, well, okay, it's a if you want to go 100% blind, you might want to not listen to this, but the premise is essentially about people with terminal illness. And I don't think I need to say much more than that.
I wouldn't say much more than that when it comes to Narcissu, personally.
Yeah, there's not much more to say than that. It is a story about people with terminal illness, and it's heart-wrenching. It is straight up like one of the most like gripping, painful stories I've ever like read in the visual novel medium, and it bums you out. But it's not like the type of bum you out that like just makes you feel like nothing was worth it. It is a bittersweet story in the end, but it is very heavy. And if you like Key for the sad and the feeling of pain, Narcissu will get that. And one thing I will say is Narcissu is free for PC, Mac, Linux, as well as its sequel, or should I say prequel? Because Narcissu does have two main parts. Like, there are more entries into the world of Narcissu, but there's mainly Narcissu itself and Narcissu Second. And my god, you cannot consume Narcissu without Second, in my opinion, because it adds so much to certain characters that you would have never imagined before. And it just adds it's such a good way to end the story of Narcissu. past the first story because the first story it is, as I love it a lot, but it is hard to read at times and like it is painful. But the second story, it gives you a bit of hope, and it's bittersweet in the best way possible, and it's got my favorite character in both of the stories. Like, it's fantastic. So that's one recommendation. Lucia, you can take the other.
I guess I'm doing a rapid fire round.
Why don't you go next? Cause Uttori. Oh wait, okay, Manpig. This is one that was actually recommended to me recently that I believe you've read. Would you put Lucy on this list?
Lucy, literally the one I was about to talk about.
Okay, so talk about Lucy.
Lucy, the eternity she wished for is so good. Please read it if you love Planetary Harmony or Stella the End or all of the above. Please, just read it.
Trust me, I'm planning to.
Just read it. It's a 7-hour read. It's really short. Just read it. Like, read it. Come on.
I've heard from basically everyone who's read it that I would love it. I just haven't read it because I don't have time.
I have 2 actually, and I don't love the robot trilogy, so that says something there.
Its tagline is if a robot can cry and smile and laugh, does it have a soul? Like, come on. Ask the important questions. Like, it's so good. Like, okay, that was literally going to be the start of my rapid fire round. Basically, because we haven't had a chance to talk about the robot trilogy, please read Lucy, the Eternity She Wished For if you like the robot trilogy. It's so good. And if you don't, still try it. It's different. It's a Korean novel. It's really cool.
Yeah. I'll give a brief honorable mention to here, which while it doesn't really resemble Key too deeply in story, it does resemble Key a lot in the sense of in structure and also characters, and also in choice systems, because like while the choice system is much more complicated than that of a Key work, this is the work that inspired Jun Maeda to write Moon. So there is a lot of important history to I know Uttori's obviously going to vouch for reading the original version. I think no matter which version you read, you are getting the experience. And if you are as invested in things like visual novel mechanics as I am, this is a must-read VN.
Read the original just because like it's free. It's the better version, please. Anyways, was gonna be on my list. So basically, let me run through my rapid fire list. If you like Rewrite for its mystery elements, please just give Science.
Oh yeah, that too.
If you like Rewrite for its mystery elements, please give Science Adventure a try. Could be Steins Gate, could be Chaos Head, could be Chaos Child. I don't care. Just read the Science Adventure series, because if you like the mystery part of Rewrite, or like almost the messed up sadness that like Rewrite can bring with stuff like Akane's route, you're gonna just eat up parts of Science Adventure. And Steins Gate is the closest related to Key in this regard, because you do start to feel that sadness and you cry a little bit. I cried at Steins Gate. So if you like Rewrite and it's like shenanigans that it gets into with the mystery and the superpowers and stuff, please just give like at a bare minimum Steins Gate a try if you've not already done that, because Science Adventure is such a highly influential series that like you might as well. I mean, my favorite Science Adventure work is Rewrite, so that's pretty much how I always joke about it. Even though Rewrite's not a Science Adventure work. Another honorable mention is if you like psychological horror, at a bare minimum, read Totino. Read Totino if you like psychological horror.
I am shook that's coming up on this episode, but I just finished it and it's amazing. It's so good.
If you like, if you like Moon, read Totino.
It is kind of similar to Moon.
Yes, and if you want something like one that like cozy aesthetic,
Too Hard.
Right, Too Hard, yeah, like legitimately
I was about to say that.
Honorable mentions. I'm just gonna go through works. If you like canon, we already mentioned Snow. If you like canon and air, read Snow. That's the easiest one to link to those two. If you like something similar to Clannad that goes into like the post the post high school life,
White Album 2. Is that where you're going with this?
Oh my, Lucia, reading my mind. White Album 2, yep.
I've heard it does have that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm interested in that, and
I
do wanna talk about-
I like Clannad and White Album 2 for a lot of the same reasons, and I have a lot of the same frustrations with both of them. It's really
But if
funny.
you like Clannad, you're really gonna love White Album 2.
Yes.
I did want to say, like, based on the White Album 2, is that and Two Heart, is that in Japan, Key and Leaf, they're two visual novel companies. Their fan base overlap a lot. Like they're
oh yeah.
they're basically like spoken of together. Like they're basically like related without being directly related, which you would find surprising. I'm sure, because most of you are from the West. Both of those who are listening are English speakers, where Leaf doesn't have much of a presence. But Leaf is a huge company in Japan, especially in terms of historical, like its history.
Leaf is to Galgay what Key was to Nakige. Like,
yeah, Leaf
they are talking about the same room.
They quite literally made visual novels. Like, not necessarily the first visual novel, but they coined the term. They made it a thing. Like, they marketed it. And Two Heart is like, if you like One and Canon for the slice of life and the characters, you will like Two Heart. Two Heart is basically, let's take away the emotional element of Canon and One, but keep the great characters and keep the
I wouldn't even say take away the emotional element. I would say take away the big picture emotional element, because each route, in at least in the second game, I'm assuming the first is the same way, is completely self-isolated. But I still cried in Two Heart 2, particularly at routes like Yuma. Like,
I personally was never really struck emotionally by Two Heart in either of its entries. Well, actually, now I say that there is one, but I do think it's an atmospheric story of the era. And if you enjoy the characters in the same way you enjoy Canon and reading Canon, reading One, those like comfy atmospheric stories, Two Heart is right there, and it's basically just like that. And you'll find a lot of these characters in common. Like they're multi-made moe. Like she's basically one of the first moe characters, and she's stellar. Like Robo Girls, multi-made them good. She's the grandma. She's great.
I would like to say, in a similar vein, if you do like Key Slice of Life, but you want to tone back on the emotions, but you want something that still kind of feels like Key in terms of like its pacing, with like that hopeful, inspirational one, this is a bit of a bias pick, but please read Miyazora or A Sky Full of Stars.
yeah,
It shares a shocking amount of similarities with Key, and it's super comfy.
hard agree.
It's a really good, just like if you want like Key style slice of life, but you don't want like the heartbreak, read Miyazora. It's a cozy work. Feels like a warm hug most days. Other than that, the only other honorable mention I have, which has not been brought up probably, is Holy Breaker. Read Holy Breaker.
No, we haven't brought it up. I will say, like, if you are a fan of Hinoue Itaru, this is another must read. Even if you're not into Chunige at all, you will get something just because it's very clear that this is a story where the lead artist is the director, because so much went into making it just look amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh my god, Holy Breaker is just gorgeous. Like, it is a visually stunning work in every sense.
Yeah, it's like, even if you don't care about the story, which I didn't for the first game, but I did in the second game. The second game has a much better story. I still like got so much enjoyment out of just watching the spectacle of the first game. So, and also props to the voice acting in Holy Breaker. Like,
Yes.
it's wonderful.
I should have paid more attention to it, but yeah. Holy Breaker is good. Holy Breaker is very, very good.
All right, shall we talk about F?
Okay, let's talk
I
about
think
F.
we hit all the heavy hitters for the
We have hit all of the heavy hitters, so it's time to talk about F, or should I say more in general, Minori as a whole, or at least
Sure.
what I've read of it. The main reason we have made this video is because I recently read F and Eden, which are like two works made by this company called Minery. And as someone who loves Key, you know me, I love Key. I've read everything Key has to do with like this franchise. All of it, I've gone through basically everything. So I've been basically trying to get into stories that fill that void. I've read Uttori, I've read Snow, I've read Key, like a lot of Key like visual novels, but none of them quite scratched the same itch for me. Minery did that. Minery gave me stories that, to me at least, feel close enough to Key and keep all the good points. So I just want to talk to you about Eden first, but Eden is basically straight out, like it is straight up a kinetic outside of Key. Like
I would not agree with that. I would call it a reverse kinetic because it's actually, I would say, the only visual novel I've read that lowers the stakes throughout and yet still makes it work.
I mean, yes, I'm structure-wise. I'm talking about like in terms of like general appeal. Like it is very much in the same vein of the kinetic novels that Key makes. Like if you like with the whole structure, the time you take reading through it, it's basically like a Lunaria like length, isn't it?
I would say it's a little longer.
It's a little longer, but generally it's still like a 10 to 12 hour visual.
10 to 12 hour visual novel, yes.
It's not the longest. It is very much in the same vein as the kinetics. But to me, Eden feels like a kinetic outside of Key. And what Lucia said is that it's actually super interestingly structured in that all the conflict happens at the beginning.
It was so weird. And when you told me that, I'm like, oh, no way they're going to make this work. And they kind of did. And I don't, like, I would like to say, oh, I don't know how, it's a spoiler and all that, but I really kind of don't know how they made it work. It's just, I just know I enjoyed it while I was reading it.
I think it fits because I don't want to talk to...
It fits the themes. It just fits the themes.
So what I'll say about Eden is the general premise. So Eden is a story essentially about the end of the world. There's a red star in the sky, and its light is just sort of harmful to like living creatures as we know it. And it's not directly harmful, but we know that the world is slowly coming to an end. So people are working to sort of migrate, obviously, because to continue the legacy of humanity. And it's a lot like Planetarian and Harmonia, as well as Stella, in that the Robot Trilogy in general, in that it is sort of like an apocalyptic-ish setting. But it's completely the opposite in terms of how it shows it, because this is not a world that is in ruins yet. Like, it probably is, like, as implied in the opening, that there is a few, like, destroyed areas, but Eden is a story that focuses on the beauty of the world, and we get into perspective of how beautiful this world is because we know that it's all going to be taken away, like by the end of this story, like past the end. One day all of this will all go away, and because we know this, we get to appreciate all these characters, just enjoy the world for what it is and everything that it has to offer. And it's one of the most beautiful, heartwarming stories I've had about the end of the world. It is a very impactful story that I know it didn't make you cry, but personally it did make me tear up quite a bit.
I'll say this though, if there's one genre that I never enjoy, it's post-apocalypse and just end of the world like type stories in general. I usually don't like them at all. This one worked for me. It didn't work for me quite as much as it did for you, but the fact that I didn't hate it is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you do like any of the kinetics, you should absolutely read Eden because it fits surprisingly well into this. Like, it feels like they were directly inspired by Key's kinetics while trying to still do something completely different.
It most really closely resembles Harmonia, I would say, in terms of tone.
I would actually agree with that, yes. It's a lot like Harmonia, but like I think we can all agree in this case for once that this is actually like more tightly written and
Oh, the story is better. Don't get me wrong, like night and day better. But tonally, they are similar, and both are very good tonally. So
yeah, and the main thing about Minery works is that they do have a message. Most Minery works, at least the ones that I've read, which is the main like big three that people like to talk about when they talk about Minery, which is F, Eden, and Supipara. They all have a general message, and Minery's isn't very subtle with them. Like they hammer them in by the end, and I think Eden's message is very meaningful, and it's one that sits right at home with Key. It's a story of just appreciation, and I don't want to give away too much, but I'll just say this: there is a reason that Eden's like icon is a blue butterfly. There is a very good reason for that. Yep, that's the one, Eden. It's a beautiful story, and also, if you like the kinetics, you'll absolutely have to give this a shot because it fits right in, and it's just an emotional roller coaster. Like Ryo is a really good protagonist. Like I'd actually rank him above all of the kinetic protagonists that he has made. Like he has.
I would not go that far. I can't put him above Tyler or T-Bit. I'd probably put him above the other three.
I definitely put him above all of them because he has a lot of development. Like I am surprised they managed to write such a character that changes so much within them.
He does change a lot. I will give him that.
Story,
yeah.
He has so much change, and the way he interacts and just influences the characters around him, especially the main heroine of the story, is such a riveting tale. And I absolutely urge everyone who likes Key to give Eden a shot. Because if there's one thing you should try out from Minery's library, it's Eden. It's literally 10 hours, and it's so good.
Yeah, it's not that much of a commitment. So it's a much, and I would say it's an easier sell than anything else we've talked about that so far for that reason.
Yeah, I agree.
It is half the length of any of the others like the other three are all 25 to 30 hour VNs. This one's about 10 to 12, so.
Yeah, and also other things that we should mention, Minery, for those who don't know, is a production juggernaut. They put the 112%, I don't know why I say 12, but they put the 112% into every single one of their games. Like, Minery's lighting is stellar. Their sprites move. They have talking mouths. They have like head tilts. They have walking animations. This is a visual novel. Why are they putting so much effort into a visual novel? Every single moment of like Minery is like you can take that and just put it as a wallpaper. Their stuff is beautiful. And these are just some of the screenshots I'm putting in from like Eden's VNDB, just because I don't have the time to search on Eden's best. But oh my god, this is such a stellar looking visual novel. And the OST, for those who don't know, the OST of Minery is none other than Tenmon. And for those who don't know Tenmon, you might know them better for working on Makoto Shinkai's film and anime. As in 5 centimeters per second, like what's it called? The Place Promised in Our Early Days, Garden of Words. It's basically that composer. He works for Minery. In fact, Makoto Shinkai, like that guy in his gorgeous art, he has links to Minery too. They have similarities. They work together. And oh my god, if there's one composer I will put behind Maeda and Orito themselves, it's Tenmon. Like their OST, in my opinion, like Eden's OST is stellar. Like it's so good.
It is very good.
It's really
Now,
good. So many
worth
different
noting
parts.
here, when you're talking about production value and the art, Eden doesn't use sprites at all. The game is entirely presented in CGs, and they're somewhere in the 200s.
Yeah.
Right? That's including variations, but like it's a 10-hour kinetic novel told entirely in CGs. Like it's impressive.
Like you would think that there would be sprites, and to be fair, there are like when characters appear, they do have like the same poses because the sprites are probably like shared between a few of the CGs. But I cracked open the visual novel after a lot of work, and like to get those sprites, and I was shocked to learn there were no sprites. So yeah, Eden is a production juggernaut, and God, please read Eden. Now, I don't know if Uttori is gonna come back because I do want someone to like sort of talk to about F with, because it's a bit hard to talk about something on my own.
This is something that I haven't read, but I am going to, and it is very high up on my reading list at the moment.
Gotcha. All right, so basically, F is probably the hardest, like Symphonic Rain, it's one of the hardest visual novels I can sell to people. And for those who
Uttori says just talk about how F is basically a fucking movie.
Yeah. F is a story that I have read after Eden in hopes of finding that next special visual novel that I hold close to my heart. And it was it. After God knows how long, I found another visual novel that I can personally put on the same tier as Little Busters, Clanad, Planetarian, Summer Pockets.
Wow.
F is right up there for me. Like, it did take me a while because I feel like out of, like, compared to them, F is not tight. There are a lot of problems with F, and in terms of, like, favorites, like, if you will be able to poke holes in the narrative, there are things that will not be to everyone's taste, but F is a very special story to me. It takes a lot of risks. Like, it is, that's it. F, a fairy tale of the two. Okay, so first of all, this is a story with no roots. It is not linear.
It's episodic, though.
Close. It's episodic. Okay, so instead of roots, we have parts. And every part is essentially its own miniature story that links into the next one to tell a grand story. And the thing is, part 1 and part 5 are virtually unrelated. But they begin with part 1 because it's important for things that are recontextualized later. It's sort of like Symphonic Rain in that area, in that it begins planting seeds at the very beginning in something that you would never imagine it would birth from. Like the first part of F, from what I've seen, not a lot of people like that part because I'll admit it, it's a slog. It's pretty long. And you don't know enough about this world to get attached to it through part 1 alone. Part 1 has the weakest conflict. It has a lot of the weakest characters. But there's something about this setting of Ottawa that grabs you, and the slight mysteries, specifically the character Amamiya Yuko. Amamiya Yuko is the first character you meet in F from the beginning, even before part 1 begins, because there's a little scene at the beginning where you meet Yuko for the first time.
Prologue,
Yuko,
so to speak.
A prologue, yeah. And Yuko is present in part 1, 2, and 5. But she is only there at the beginning and just barely hints at the overarching story. You will never be able to predict the full story through reading part 1 alone. And part 1 is virtually unrelated to the big story, and it's very much a slice of life, but not an exciting one. It's very much based on these characters and them facing things.
How would you compare it to Two Hearts Slice of Life?
Oh, it's completely different. I'd actually say, if anything, it's closer to... It's Symphonic Rain, but not depressing, and a little bit less stale, but not... it's not an exciting slice of life.
Sure.
It's very much slice of life. It is characters going to school, they're talking with each other, and they're just facing their issues with daily life.
Uttori says it shares more similarities with Air's slice of life.
I will agree with that. I would actually agree with that. It's very much just these characters, they're going through their daily lives and they're trying to work through their issues. Now, one thing about F's narrative is that each part does have an issue, but that isn't very evident at first because the first part has a very minor issue. Like you would barely call it a conflict. Like it doesn't feel representative of the story as a whole. But each part gets more and more intense with the story. And by part 5, it is an entirely different beast to what it was from part 1. You would not be able to tell that these are the same kinds of like the same kind of gravity because they are hugely different in tone. But
it scales fantastically.
It's a story that scales in its size and like its ambition. And each part is necessary to tell the next one. And that's also why it's very hard to talk about F. Because most of F's...
it's another one of those. But those VNs are always the best ones. Like,
in my opinion, the best parts in F are part 3 and part 5. But to talk about part 5, you need to talk about part 4. To talk about part 4, you need to talk about part 3. To talk about part 3, you need to talk about part 2. You see the issue here.
Yeah.
So the only part you can talk about with F is part 1. But part 1 is the most boring one. It is nothing happens in part 1. It is essentially an extended prologue. But if you are willing to get through part 1, and if you're willing to, and if you just get absorbed into this world of Ottawa, because that's what kept me reading F. It's the setting. It's those moments that I can only call the Minori moments. Minori has so many moments where you just forget that you're reading something that's like relatively boring. And whether it's the lighting, the CGs, and just the dialogue, what these characters are saying, what
moments like this in Eden too.
They mean. Eden does this very well, and it's very much a Minori staple from what I've seen. They have so many moments that just leave you in awe. And the story is worth reading for those moments. And if you can get through part 1 and especially part 2, if you are hooked by part 2, which I was, it's a done deal.
You're good.
Part 3 is part 3 I'd say is the driving point, because part 3 is the first moment where F becomes a lot like Key. It's a very emotional story, and if you said you would cry at part 3, I would believe you. I would fully believe you. It is a beautiful story on its own. But that's part 3, and part 4 and part 5 are their own other beasts. It's hard to talk about part 4, because I said part 5 is the best part. What about part 4? The thing is, part 4 and part 5 are linked together, sort of like how
Those are the ones that are called the Ladder Tale, right?
Ladder Tale is part 3 and part 4 and part 5, yes.
Oh, 3, 4, 5, okay.
Yeah. Although the anime splits the first half into part 1, 2, and 3, and the other half being 4 and 5. But 4 and 5 are tied together very intrinsically. They might as well be one story. But the difference is the perspective. Part 4 takes the perspective of a character that I don't want to talk too much about, because I don't want to talk about her too much, because you don't know how important she is until you get to part 4. But part 5 is the part where we talk about Amamiya Yuko. Now, if you remember what I said, Amamiya Yuko is the first character you meet in the story. Oh, I fully understand if you think part 4 is your favorite. It's great, especially with context of part 5, I'm just saying. Amamiya Yuko is basically the thing that ties all of F together, and especially its message. Now, part 5 is a story. The more I think back on it, the more I realize it is basically everything I look for in a story. And give me a second, actually. Catch my composure. I look back on part 5 with a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings because it's not. You'd think that me being Manpig, I like the enjoyment. There are parts of Part 5 that was really hard to read, but those moments of just emotion and humanity make it so worth it. And Part 5, in my opinion, is like masterpiece storytelling. It like, I don't want to overhype it because it's not perfect. There are a lot of issues with F, but can I just talk about Amamiya Yuko? Yuko is one of my favorite characters of all time. Like, I can't talk too much about her because everything about her is a mystery.
You have told me she is pretty much set in stone to take your best girl of the year of everything you've read this year.
There is no competition. Like, there are very few characters that I can put on like the highest pedestal I can of characters in general. Like, Yuko isn't just a heroine to me. Like, she is a character that has her own story. She has her own tale. She has her own pathos, and it's just like, it is the most humbling and heart-wrenching and inspiring stories I've ever had the honor of witnessing. And god damn it, if you dislike every single one of F's cast, which I won't understand, but if you dislike any of them, to your own. If you dislike Yuko, I'm not sure we can be friends.
Based on design alone, Chihiro, I think, is going to be my favorite. And I also really like her VA. So
Chihiro is also a favorite. Here's the thing about F's cast to me. It's one of those where I love every character, so I can't really rank. Like,
yeah.
I love Chihiro to death. She's a 10 out of 10 character. I think she ranks like 3rd on the heroine list, or like.
Yeah, Rika 2.0.
I can't pick, but like, I love all of these characters.
Uttori says F is sloppy, messy, and sometimes rough to see, but so is humanity, and that's what is beautiful.
Absolutely. Like, that is the big thing about F, is that it's not perfect, it's not beautiful. There are areas of this visual novel where you will find it hard to read, especially in like the latter tale, where latter tale is where they bring in the Nakige.
Yeah.
When you see it all and you look back on it, you realize what these characters are trying to tell you. Like, I love Part 2, even like despite the fact that it's not one of the big parts, because Part 2, the story came at a time where I really needed it. And
sometimes when those stories happen, my god, is it powerful.
It's so
like,
good. And like, I feel
I had this moment with Loopers about a year ago. Like
Part 2 managed to completely change my enjoyment of a character, because I actually hated a certain character who I now deem like my second favorite character.
Wow.
I used to not like them at all, and now they're my second favorite. It completely turned me around on them. And when you get to the rest of it, like, it's just, I can't say enough, because I can't say what makes them so good. But when I look back on the stories, these characters, I think of these characters almost like friends, sort of like the Little Busters. I know them as like people I've spent time with and have appreciated, like Summer Pockets. And when I look at Yuko, who I'm pretty sure I've talked enough about, but there is very, very little characters that strike a chord to me so well. Like, Yuko, even like, I don't want to like compare things, but Yuko is just such a special character. If she was like part of the key heroine, she would probably be up there with Yumemi as one of my favorite like key heroines.
That's some really high praise coming from you. It says a lot for me.
Because Yuko is a character that is everything that I love in she's one of those characters that just hits every point of me.
Uttori says second favorite heroine, best character.
And I respect that. I respect that. Like, Yuko is just such a masterfully written character that if you don't if you don't appreciate what she's trying to tell you with her story,
She is thematically the core of F.
I just like I don't want to sound like dismissive of other people's opinions because everyone's entitled to their opinion, but like if you dismiss Yuko's message and story, I would genuinely feel sorry for you because what she teaches you, what she tells you with her story is one of the most beautiful things I have ever experienced. And the fact that I am genuinely fighting tears just recounting these memories should say enough. This is a story that has impacted me so much in a way that I genuinely can't explain it, because that's the crazy thing, is that I actually didn't find myself completely in love with F when I first consumed it, because I'm not even sure why, but I get the best way I can describe it is like this. When you this isn't necessarily a type of thing that has a lot of correlation, but like if you've lost someone close to you, like if let's say your grandma has just passed away, it doesn't sink in right away. Like you're in shock at first and you're like, this
you need
happened.
to sit on the story for a while. And I'm sure some of us have had these moments with plenty of key stories too, where they don't hit right away, and then later down the road, you're like, wait, that's what I read? And then it just kind of hits. Like,
yeah, and that's very much my experience.
Much like
with F.
Summer Pockets, Uttori said. And I had this moment with
When
Clannad.
I finished F for the first time, I was like, oh my god, that was a roller coaster. I need to break, but I gave it a 9 out of 10. When I watched the anime adaptation and I remembered what had happened, I was a sobbing mess. It's one of those stories that in retrospect, you learn exactly what it's trying to tell you and why it's so valuable. And the big reason I consider F like right there with all the other keywords is that message. It imparted to me a message that I would say is on par with Little Busters. It is just as life-changing as Clannad, and it's something that will stick to me as long as Planetarians. It is a message that changed me as a person. It's something that I want to live up to, and Yuko's story, I can't undersell it. I don't want to oversell it, but for me, this is like one of my favorite stories of all time, and Yuko is absolutely up there as one of my favorite characters of all time. If you like Key for the message, less generally everything else, but if you like Key for their inspiring messages, please read F. F has one of the best messages I've ever seen a story give. And it left me...
This is why we needed to talk about this. This is why we needed to talk about this one on this episode.
Because
I exist again.
nobody to talk with.
All right.
Hey, you're back.
Not to take up too much time because this episode is already very long.
Oh, that's okay. I'm not gonna same day this one. Sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
Half a Fairy Tale of Two at its core is a story about the indomitable human spirit, which sounds like a meme, but it is absolutely not an exaggeration.
Absolutely fully, I agree. It is a story about humans and how strong people can be.
This story is going to be both I can't even say it's grounded, but you're going to feel like these characters are probably the most real you'll ever feel you've read a character, because of the fact that these characters just level with each other. And it's very nice. You feel like by the end of it, you've interacted with a group of friends, and not just like a group of friends because they told you they were friends, but a group of friends because you got to see them be friends and struggle with it. You got to... I mean, this I actually like part one. I've always argued that like part one's one of my favorite parts because the conflict is such a non-conflict that it could only exist among friends.
That's fair. That's totally fair. I actually understand that.
Yeah, like it is a playground's quarrel. It's like if Lucia and I went, you know what, bet like you can't do the Agu edits all week, and that's the conflict of a route. That's basically what it comes down to. But it's so
that
charming.
was hard. That was hard. It was so hard. Okay, like.
But you see, it's a charming aspect of that because it's a playground's quarrel, but that's what makes it fun to read.
Absolutely.
F is quite
And
literally.
y'all had so much fun watching me struggle to not edit into an agoo every time I said something sus. Like,
It,
it was
what
a struggle.
makes F appealing is just that it is a story about people.
It's a story about people, and as much as I love Yuko, the reason I love her is because she's a very normal person, and she's
This is the least anime visual novel you'll read, by the way.
like, here's the thing, and Uttori, you can tell me if you agree with this, but Yuko and Yumemi are they are characters that push a very similar message, but as characters are completely different because Yumemi is a selfless robot.
They could not be further apart in dynamic. Like,
But the
Yuko,
message is the same.
the message is the same, but Yuko is definitely a far more, like, Yumemi has got the anime-isms that Yuko doesn't.
Yumemi is a robot, like that is her point. Yuko pushes the same message that Planetarian does, but through an actual person. And Yuko is like, she hits every single chord.
Yuko is literally what Yumemi talks about whenever during the projection speech. It's that side of
Oh my
humanity
gosh.
that she talks about. Like, it would be like the thing that Yumemi pulls up, like, here's my memories of like humans that like made me happy, and that it's just Yuko.
She makes me happy. Yuko is just such a special character to me.
Yuko is absolutely fantastic. She's not my favorite heroine, but she is my
Let me guess, it's Mizuki.
yeah, absolutely correct.
You're so smart. I'm gonna say this for every F heroine. I love this cast. It's great.
Like, I find it just funny. You're like, let me guess this one. I'm like, absolutely.
Mizuki is great. I love Mizuki. I love Kei. I love Chihiro. I love even Miyako. Even though I consider her the weakest, she's still a great character. They're all great, and I love this story.
All of them are great.
They are really good, and if the gushing doesn't make it obvious, please read F. It's so. If you like Key, I genuinely think you will find something to like about this because it is so Key-like, and especially the message. Because one thing I always take about Key and why this company is my favorite company is how much it's changed my life. And F is a story that has most certainly changed my life. It has given me a character that I can truly be inspired by and relate to. And she's just so special to me in every way. And the thing about F is that let's talk about the elephant in the room. Nobody talks about it. I have been so lonely.
I had not even heard of it until you told me to read it, Manpig. Like,
I have been so lonely because none of my friends have read F. It's me and Uttori and one other person who got onto F because I read F. One other person. And I'm tired of that. I know that there are Minori fans out there. So this is what the big second giant announcement and the reason we made this Thanksgiving special. We've already announced a Snow server, but the Keyverse is also getting yet another little sister. And we will be making, let's say, a Minori server. A Minori-verse, should we say. I will head it for now. And we're planning on soft launching it because here's the thing. There's not a lot of people out there who have read Minori. And I haven't interacted with many people who have as well. So I don't know this community. And it's why I've been a bit anxious with creating this decision. But what we've agreed on is that we'll soft launch the server and we'll share it around and we'll try and build a Minori community and try to make a place that's welcoming and warm as Keyverses. Because that's what we want to be, is we want to get people into these stories and we want to share our love. And I very much want this new Minori server to be like Keyverse in that we can accept each other's opinions and also just get along. I want to make a new place for these fans of this company that no one really talks about because, sad to say, but Minori isn't with us anymore because, well, their budget was so high that they kind of just like bankrupted themselves. They went too hard.
It was clear after reading Eden what happened, like, and why that happened.
Which, by the way, remember what I said about Eden about being gorgeous? F is very much that, but put into a 50-hour visual novel.
Right, because
it's a full lengther. But
yeah,
its quality doesn't shy away one bit. The OST, F's OST is one of my favorites. Like, it's stellar. The visuals, like, there are backgrounds and CGs every second scene, and there are sprites. There are sprites that are like interacting with the background. How is this a visual novel?
I think what's even crazier is the fact that like F isn't even like that inaccessible. It's on Manga Gamer, so like more people.
It's in Steam. You can just get it right on Steam.
You can, and that's how I read it. And
yeah, like it is just there. Just read it. Like, come on, it is on. It could not be more accessible.
Yeah, we should mention this actually. Of the VMs we have talked about today, F, Eden, and Symphonic Rain are all on Steam, so you can get them all there.
And 5 is easily accessible because they're still producing copies to this day.
You would have to buy a physical copy, but yeah, the only one that's like kind of difficult to get a hold of legally is Snow. But it is possible.
Rest in peace, Studio Mavis.
Yeah.
rest in peace, but also
not really rest in peace.
Maybe it's a good thing considering the direction that they went in, but yes, essentially, what I'm trying to get on with is we're getting a little sister, and I will be the head honcho of the F server for now.
It's so exciting.
And I do want to encourage you to try F, try Eden, at least Eden. Like Eden is the easier one. It's 10 hours. Come on. Try Eden and maybe consider joining the Minori server and trying this new work. And hopefully we can build a new community for Minori, because from what I've seen, there are Minori fans out there, but they're incredibly scattered, and I've not been able to have the chance to talk to any of them because they're just God knows where. They don't have a community. Like this
they all sort of just read Minori and goes, wow, that was good. Now I hope there's other people that like it, and then it just are just like, oh well, I'm not gonna search for other people. I guess there's no other people.
I have met at 3 Minori fans total. But I have seen comments when there's actually a new Minori work that's getting translated officially, and there were comments on that video. There were people who were excited for the new Minori work, but no, Minori doesn't have a community. So I want to try and give Minori the community that it deserves. Especially since we are a Key community, and Minori is very similar to Key, at least in its main works, at least the works that I've read, they are very similar. And I truly believe if you love Key, you will find something to love in Minori's library, whether it be Eden, F, Supipara, which I didn't even talk about because Supipara, unfortunately, it's not complete because it'll never be complete because Minori went under. But Supipara is very similar to Key in its own right. It's basically like Little Busters, the common route. The only reason I don't fanboy about Supipara is because it literally ended before it was able to get into the good stuff. If I compare F Part 1 and 2 to Supipara Part 1 and 2, which is all we have of Supipara, I rank Supipara 1 and 2 higher. It is the most fun Minori has been. It's very much Little Busters-esque. And it had so much potential, but just didn't work out. But in terms of this library, I genuinely believe if you like Key, you'll find something to like about Minori works. Whether it be the message, whether it be the emotion, whether it be the characters, you'll find something to love. In my personal opinion, Minori is the closest company to Key that isn't Key.
Some high praise. Oh, it's so exciting. There's so much. I am excited to read F. I will be posting about that in the new Minori server. when I get to it, which will be very soon. It is the next major work I plan on reading. So,
Heck yeah, I'm excited.
if you want to hear my thoughts on what Manpig just read about, and I'm actually more excited to read it now than I was before after hearing you talk about it. Yeah, that's a thing you can do.
That's exciting. So yeah, consider joining the Minery server. We will officially soft launch on December, because for those who don't know, F takes place during Christmas, so it's quite fitting.
Oh my god, that's so cool.
Yeah, F takes place during Christmas, so it's sort of just like perfect timing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll have the invite link here. I don't think it'll be like, what I mean by soft launch is that we'll have the invite link here, but we won't advertise it yet because I just don't feel comfortable moderating, like having a community of like say 50 people when I'm the only moderator and I don't know anyone else.
That's make it a slow build.
Yeah, I plan to take this server one step at a time, but we are going to have a little sister, and hopefully we'll have both Keyverse and the Minery server to both enjoy these very similar works in, because these are very similar works. Like, you will find so much of the same stuff to like. And I genuinely, like, personally, if like check them all, but if you can only pick one of the F ones, because I genuinely believe every Key fan will find something to love in one of these stories. Like, they're so alike. Like,
yeah.
As I said, F to me is, I rank it with my highest keywords. It is on the same tier, and I didn't expect that at all. But it is one of those stories that just it leaves its mark, and I genuinely, really want people to give it a shot, because not enough people have. Not nearly enough people have.
All right, I think we're good. I think
This was
we've talked about a lot. It's a long episode. It's gonna take me some time to edit, so I'll have it out sometime in the next few days. And thank you for being here. Good night, everyone.
Have a good evening.